How can the person who a woman gave her deepest vow become the person she despises the most? How can the beautiful woman a man couldn't stay away from become the woman he can't stand to be around? How is it that we can fall in love and fall out of love? The theme of our marriage series is, can a couple stay in love till forever? And even if I told you it wasn't possible, you would go out and still try it anyway. And the reason is because having a group of bowling buddies or having fishing buddies or just some girlfriends that you do everything together with isn't enough. There's something inside of us that wants to find someone special that we can spend forever with in a married relationship, and we believe it's possible to stay in love with that person till forever. Now, when we started our series, we said, first of all, that in order to make love last forever, we needed to make love a verb. Otherwise, I need to do the things that would make my spouse feel that I love her or him. We got to love like Christ loved. We have to make our partner feel as if our partner is the priority in our life. And if you took notes, and some of you did, you said, I'm going to give it a try, and then you went home and did some of your homework, and you decided, well, it's not that simple. Well, it isn't that simple, but it's possible to stay in love. It's possible to stay in love if you grew up in a very healthy, loving family, where you saw love lived out on a regular basis, where you saw people agree to put each other first, where you saw people that mutually submitted to each other, then it would be possible for you to come into your relationship, in a married relationship, with a heart that was really full and a heart that was really healthy. But most people bring some significant baggage into their relationships. We're all dinged up a bit. Dad didn't come to all of our games. Mom didn't come to any of our recitals. Maybe there was alcohol and drugs in the family. Maybe there were some money issues that messed the family up. Maybe the younger brother got most of the attention because he had so many problems and then you felt left out. So our hearts aren't always healthy when we enter into our marriage relationship. Now, I want to introduce you to Mr. and Mrs. Glass. He thought she was the most beautiful woman in the entire world. She looked at him and said, he's handsome, he's got a degree, he's got a job, he can provide for me. And they began to date, and they were really careful on their dates. They wanted each other to fall in love with them. And so they dated for about a year. They fell in love, they got engaged. A half a year later, they were married. And everything was just moving along smoothly. And then one day, they bumped into each other. And something came out. And Mr. Glass said, what was that? And Mrs. Glass said, I didn't know. He had anger issues. And so they began to talk about it. And he said to her, when you say that, it makes me mad. And she said, oh, you're blaming me? And more stuff came out. And so she went off to her sister's house and told her sister, he's got anger issues. And he went to, well, he's a man, so we don't know where he goes. You know, maybe he went to the mirror and he looked in the mirror and said, I didn't know she could make me so mad. And so when they got back together again, they talked a little bit more, and he told her what irritated him. And she said, oh, you're blaming me for the issues. And they really banged each other, and more stuff came out. And Mr. Glass feels that the blue beads come out of him because of what Mrs. Glass says and does. And Mrs. Glass thinks the pink beads come out of her because of what Mr. Glass, the blue beads, does and says to her. Now, the truth is, the reason the blue beads come out of Mr. Glass is because they are already in Mr. Glass. And the reason the pink beads come out of Mrs. Glass is because they are already in Mrs. Glass. And there's something about a romantic relationship that brings the best out of us and also brings the worst out of us. But if we don't want the blue beads to come out of us as men, and we don't want the pink beads to come out of us as women, we're going to have to pay attention to what's going on the inside of us. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says, above all else. Now, the writer of that is Solomon. And Solomon was the wisest man in all of the world. And Solomon had written the book of Proverbs. He wrote the book of Ecclesiastes. He wrote the book of Song of Solomon. And he says to us, above everything else that I have written about, this is the most important thing. Above all else, guard your heart. Now, really what he's saying there is pay attention to what's going on the inside. Now, back then, the heart was considered the seat of the emotion. So Solomon says, guard your heart. Keep the bad guys out. And guard your heart so that you keep that which is valuable. Otherwise, protect and pay attention to your heart. Now, most of us are really good at blaming others for what comes out of us. For instance, say a guy is dated 4 women over a period of 1 year. And every woman that he dates causes blue beads to come out of him. He will tell you that he's just a bad chooser of women. He's got to find another woman that's different. Really? Could it be possible that the problem isn't the woman, but it's the man and the blue beads that are in him? Now, most of us have no idea how to guard our heart. We're going to learn that today. But we're really good at monitoring our partner's behavior. We're really good at pointing out what they should do, what they shouldn't do, what they should say, what they better not say. But both guarding the heart and monitoring behavior is important. I want to show you how they connect. Our relationship with the person that we love, you will find out the person you love has a list of things that they want to feel. Because I don't want you to miss those things, I type them on your outline. Your partner wants to feel respected, admired, desired, cherished, protected, defended, trusted, prioritized, pursued, attractive. And every one of those things that you desire to feel are good things. And we fell in love because the person that we were dating made us feel admired and desired and cherished and protected, etc. So when we tell our girlfriend or our fiance or our spouse, don't do that, it is because you don't like how what they do makes you feel. We primarily want them to say and do the things that make us feel loved and cherished and happy and appreciated. We depend on that special someone to make us feel confident and appreciated. And it's normal to want to keep those emotions alive. So we monitor their behavior because we like how that behavior makes us feel. Or we tell them, don't say that and don't do that because we don't like how it makes us feel. Now listen to this. If we came into the relationship with only good things inside of us, we wouldn't have a problem. But we all have stuff on the inside that causes all kinds of problems. Your ability to feel the way you want to feel is in many ways dependent on the condition of your heart. Let me give you an illustration. If you never felt approval, you never felt appreciated. Matter of fact, all of your life you were unappreciated for years and years and years. And then you got married. Your ability to feel appreciated by your husband will be greatly challenged by your heart that's been damaged. And it works the other way. If the husband's heart is damaged, he'll find it difficult to feel appreciated and accepted. So your ability to fall in love and stay in love has as much to do with the condition of your heart as your ability to monitor the behavior of your spouse. Both are essential. But we tend to monitor behavior hoping that'll make us feel good, but we fail to guard our heart. We fail to pay attention to what's going on the inside. Now listen to the rest of Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Did you catch that? Guard your heart because everything you do flows from what's going on inside of your heart. So if your heart isn't in good shape, it'll be very difficult to maintain a healthy and loving relationship. Eventually, what is in you is going to come out of you no matter who you are with. So listen carefully. I recommend you change your heart, not your spouse. Because if you change your spouse and your heart hasn't changed, what was in you is still going to come out. And it will follow you the rest of your life. So how do you monitor your heart? Okay? Number one, when you bump into each other, stop and think about what you're feeling before you speak. Now, women, listen. You won't have any difficulty identifying what you feel. Women are good at that. Men, we really don't know what we feel. We'll probably say we feel frustrated. Or we'll say, I feel frustrated because I feel angry. And that'll be it. So I've put some words down that I hope will help you identify some of your emotions, both women and men, okay? You feel anger. You feel left out. You feel unimportant. You feel embarrassed. You feel unappreciated. The man comes home from work late, he gets yelled at, he feels unappreciated. You feel ugly, you feel unlovable, you feel like a failure. He says, every time you compare me to your brother and your six figures in the nice house, I feel like I'm a failure. You feel ugly and unlovable. You feel old and stupid. You feel lonely. He just watches TV when we could go for a walk. Yuck. I'd rather watch TV. No. Abandoned. You feel scared or out of control or betrayed. Maybe you feel jealous. Maybe every time you see your sister-in-law and see the clothes that she wears and how good she looks in those clothes, you feel jealous because you can't wear that dress and you don't look that good in that dress. You feel picked on. You feel disrespected. This may help you know exactly what you're feeling. So the next time you bump into each other and these feelings arise in there, you need to identify what the feeling is. You're mad, but why are you mad? Once you figure out why you're mad, name it. But name it out loud to yourself and to God. Say to God, listen, this is what I'm feeling, and this is why I feel it. Now remember, it's already in you. It drives you. But once you name it, it begins to lose its power. Now the second thing you do to guard your heart is this. At some time, you're going to have to sit down with your spouse and let them know what you feel and why. I recommend that you don't do this while you're fighting, because nobody's listening. But at an appropriate time, over a cup of coffee, sitting at the dining room table or on the couch, sit back and let them know what's going on the inside of you. Example would be this, and I've already mentioned it. You say to your spouse, you get upset when I come home late from work. It makes me feel unappreciated. I work late sometimes because I just can't get away and I'm trying to provide for my family. Now listen carefully. There are no wrong feelings. You can't control how you feel. It's just something that's in there. You are not saying to your spouse, it's your fault. You're simply saying, this is how I feel when this happens. So, if your spouse tells you why they feel unappreciated, this is what the other spouse says. I'm glad you told me. That's it. I'm glad you told me. You don't go and try to defend yourself for what you're saying. Just process it. Healthy people, once they find out what they do that makes their spouse or anyone mad or insecure or unappreciated, you know what healthy people do? They stop doing it. They just stop doing it. Now, number 3. We need to take these things to the Lord privately. I want you to listen to 1 Peter 5:5-7. All of you clothe yourself with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud and shows favor to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. Now, let me just ask a question. What are you going to do with all your hopes and dreams and desires and your need to be appreciated and cherished and admired and desired and trusted? These things that you really want and you feel you really need, what are you going to do with those things? Well, you can do one of three things. You can ignore them. I'm going to tell you, if you ignore them, you're going to wear yourself out just giving and giving and giving and not receiving. You can sit back and say, well, I'm just going to stay busy. I'm going to play more golf. I'm going to play more softball. I'm going to work more hours. I'm going to do more gardening. I'm going to do more shopping just to silence my unhappiness. If you do that, you're going to set yourself up for number 3, which is finding someone else. Now, let me just say this. It's okay if you're dating to go find somebody else. It's also okay, but it's a little sticky, if you're engaged, to walk away and go find somebody else. But if you are married, leaving is a real problem. Why? Well, let me put it this way. Wherever you go, and whoever you are with, you are there. You are there with all your blue beads or all your pink beads and all your unhealthy heart, and no matter who you are with, those blue beads and those pink beads are going to come out. So why not stay together and learn to fall in love with each other again? Because you'll tell me that if you go out and get a divorce today, that in a couple years you may fall in love again and you may marry that person. So if you can fall in love again, why can't you fall in love again with the same person that you're married to? Now, let's move on. So what do? We clothe ourselves with humility. Very simply, it means go small. It means go others first. It means go to the back of the line. In any transaction or any transition or any challenge, ask yourself this question. What would a humble person do? You say, well, Pastor Dave, I'm not a humble person. When I get mad, I let it rip. And I raise my voice, and I change my language, and I use words that are unwholesome, and I push and I shove, and I hold grudges. And my response is, I know that. But you should ask, what would a humble person do? And if you begin to do what a humble person does, you'll become humble. And this applies to every relationship you have, not just marriage. So why should you humble yourself? Listen to what it says in the text. For God opposes the proud. Do you really want to be in opposition to God? Every time you raise your voice, yell and scream, throw things, God sits back and opposes you. He doesn't take your side. He opposes you. And then it says, but he shows grace to the humble. So if I want God's grace, I have to humble myself. And what happens when you humble yourself is this. You're giving God an invitation to give you the power, the strength, the endurance, the desire, the motivation, and the insight that you need to make things and keep things right. It may take time for God to give you those things. But God says just humble yourself. Open yourself up to what I want to give, and I will begin to give you those things. But if you don't humble yourself, you will be opposed by me. So what side do you want to be on? I don't think any of us want to be in opposition with God. And then 1 Peter 5:6 says, you humble yourself under the almighty hand. Otherwise, you humble yourself under the protection of God. So God comes along and says, okay, I see your humility. I see that you want to be under my authority. And the safest place for you is to be under my care and under my authority. Now you sit back and say, okay, I like what you said, but I need something practical. 1 Peter 5:7 says this, casting all your cares on him, for he cares for you. Otherwise, take all your expectations. Take all your unmet hopes, unmet dreams, unmet desires, all your unmet feelings. You're not being cherished. You're not being respected. You're not being loved. You're not feeling that you're attractive to your husband or to your wife. And cast them on Jesus. Now listen, this is an invitation for you to unload on God. Instead of carrying that heavy box of unmet expectations around, God says cast it, fling it, unload it on him. All that he said, she promised, we talked about it, but nothing changed. Before you do any more talking about those things to your spouse, unload it on God. Now, let me tell you something about that type of prayer. There are times when you really need to unload on God. To stop the polite prayers, stop the formal prayers, stop trying to figure out how it's going to sound. Just honest prayer, okay? Have you ever been angry with your spouse and raised your voice and let them know that? There's somebody went like this. They lie. But when you let that out, you're letting it out. You're being honest. Okay, it's what's going on the inside. God sits back and says, it's time for you to be honest with me about what's going on the inside of your life right now. Be honest. So I recommend you get on your knees. Okay, that's a humble position. And then you speak to God out loud. Not just up here, but out loud with your voice. Okay? You have no doubt that God heard you. And you will ultimately experience the peace of God and the presence of God and even the power of God moving in you. Let the tears flow. Let your voice cry out. Don't hold any of your feelings back. I put some things down here. God, I'm so frustrated. There are times I wish I had never met him or her. I wish she or he wasn't part of my life. It's just one lie after another. I sought you before we were married. I asked for your leading. It seemed right. Evidently you were wrong. Or maybe I misread what you were saying. But look at the mess I'm in. God says that's okay. It doesn't sound like a nice prayer, but it's a real prayer. And God can handle it. Why can God handle that? It says in the next verse, casting all your cares on him, for he cares for you. The reason you can bring it to God is because he cares for you. He's not going to shut you down. If it's important to you, it's important to God, your Father in heaven. So bring these hopes and dreams and desires that haven't been fulfilled to Jesus and bring it in humble but honest prayer. And keep on bringing your disappointments and frustrations to him in prayer every single day. Now, I didn't write this verse down in your notes, but if you're taking notes, write Psalm 55, verse 17 down. Go home and read that. You might even want to read that prayer But Psalm 155:17 says, and David is unloading on God because a friend has turned against him, okay? And he says, I cry out to you morning and evening and afternoon, and I complain and I murmur to you, and you hear me. I love that. Instead of going and complaining and murmuring to your spouse, you go to God and tell him what's on your heart. And you do it in the morning, and you do it in the afternoon, and you do it in the evening, until God moves and begins to answer your prayer. Now, please listen. When you do this, you're not telling God how to work. You're telling God you're open to him working. It's possible that the first remarkable thing that God will do is not change your spouse, but it'll begin to change you. You may begin to rethink your list of unmet hopes, dreams, and expectations and unmet feelings. You may take some of those things off your list. You may discover it's impossible for your spouse to meet this and this. They weren't designed by God to meet those things. Only God can meet those things. You may discover that your husband, your wife, wish for the exact same things. And so you can begin to work on those things together. But the transformation in your relationship will never, ever happen if you're complaining to your spouse first. Because healing an unhealthy heart is God's responsibility. Your spouse cannot heal your broken heart. Only God can. So I've given you some homework. The first 2 weeks, I'm going to give you homework number 3. And I want to let you know, it was fun for me to sit down with Jeanette over a table, over coffee, and talk to each other about our dreams and our expectations and our hopes. And hopefully you found that to be true, to talk to each other about that. But here's your homework. You got to pay attention to your heart. Identify your emotions. Why is it that I get mad when he says or she says, or he does or I do? What is it that makes me mad? Now, name your feeling out loud to God. So now this is a private thing, okay? So it's just you doing this, okay? You're not telling your spouse. Lay it out loud to God. At some point in time, though, share your feelings with your spouse, not as a criticism. But let them know why you feel what you feel. And in honest prayer, let God know what your frustrations are. And don't quit until he's answered you. And let him heal your heart. Let's unite together in prayer. Lord, your son healed the lame. He gave sight to the blind. He opened deaf ears. He loosened tongues that didn't speak. He set people free from demonic oppression. He healed all kinds of diseases, and he forgave sins. And you're the one who heals damaged hearts. So we come to you now, and we ask you to begin in each of us the process of healing a damaged heart, so we can live and love like Christ till forever. What joy it will be to be free from the pain of a damaged heart. And thank you for the promise that we can bring it to you morning, afternoon, and evening all our complaints and all our murmurings, and you will answer us and bring us peace and healing. So, Lord, we open ourselves up to you. And we pray this in Christ's name. Amen.